Welcome to the La Crosse Virtual Mayoral Forum. My name is Eric Timmons. I'm the editor of the La Crosse Independent, and I will be moderating this evening's forum with my colleague Laura Abellera. We've worked with a diverse group of local community organizations to put together the questions we have tonight. And we've also worked to try and make this forum as fair and as possible to all candidates. Okay, we have a lot to get through, so let's get down to business. Laura?
Hi, I'm Laura. I'm excited to be here with all of you candidates, as well as all of the lovely community members watching the live stream of this forum. We have a lot of content for you, so to start off, we're going to ask that each candidate introduce yourself, and you will each have 30 seconds to do so. We will go alphabetically. Kathy, we'll start with you.
Hi, my name is Catherine Blanchard, and I am a lifelong resident of La Crosse. I own a small business on the north side, and I really love my hometown. And I would like to have the chance to represent you and this community as the next mayor. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Martin Gall. I'm a retired member of the Machinists Union. I'm a current council member representing District 11 since 2015, and I'm also the current council president, and I have been in that position since 2017. Thank you.
Zebulon. It looks like you're muted.
Can you hear me now? I'm sorry. Hey everyone, my name is Zebulon Kemp. I was born and raised in La Crosse. I am one of 14 siblings in my family. I'm currently the bar manager down at Shimmy's Bar and Grill on 1203 West Avenue. Prior to that, I was in the Navy from 2008 until 2019. Thank you for the opportunity.
Joe? Joe, it's your turn. Okay, we'll go to Vicki.
Okay. Hi, I'm Vicki Markison, and I have been your experienced community leader in La Crosse for 25 years now. I started here as a TV reporter. I grew into helping residential housing with the Builders Association, helped develop a 13-county region with the Seven Rivers Alliance, and led more than 600 businesses in La Crosse County with the Chamber of Commerce, particularly guiding them during the COVID shutdowns. And now I have my own business telling stories of our community because I love our community. I volunteer in our community. I have 3 boys, ages 13 to 20, that keep me busy at all levels of local schools. And I appreciate you hearing me out. Thank you.
Jessica?
Thank you, and thank you, Eric and Laura, for hosting us this evening. My name is Jessica Olson. I'm currently on the La Crosse City Council representing District 8. In addition to my public service, I'm a local businesswoman, and I am really looking forward to this forum tonight. Thank you.
Mitch, you're up.
Hi, I'm Mitch Reynolds. I have lived in La Crosse for about 25 years. My wife and I live on near the campus part of the city. We have 2 adult children who also live in La Crosse. I have a grandchild on the way. I've spent the last couple of years working for Whole Tree Structures as the operations manager, and before that spent about 16 years on the air at WIZM. For 15 years of that, I hosted a local news and talk program in the afternoon. Thank you so much for having us here.
Hi everyone, my name is Greg Salares. I made La Crosse my home about 80 years ago, and I fell in love with the city. I think I can help it get a little bit, better. And right now I'm just managing a small business downtown, and that's it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sam Schneider. I am a longtime native of the south side of La Crosse and a small business owner that I started during the beginning of the pandemic. And I've seen a lot of concerns that the people of the city of La Crosse is not addressing properly. And I would love to bring more attention to those concerns and represent everyone in the city of La Crosse. Thank you so much for hosting this.
Hi, I'm Chris Stolpa. I've lived here for 34 years. And in that time, I've fought for the citizens as much as possible, fought against the city council, Quick Trip, big business, and the police to all make sure they were taken care of. And I would hope that I can continue to do that. Thank you.
And Joe, we'll try you one more time. Okay.
All right, we'll move on to our first question. It looks like Conrad's connection is down. We'll see if we can get him back. Okay, so candidates, the first question is, do you support the creation of a community oversight board for the police department in the city of La Crosse? And as a reminder, candidates, you have 1 minute to answer this question. And Martin, you will be first.
Thank you. Well, I guess how to answer that would be to say I'm not really sure what the makeup of that board would be. I'm not opposed to it in principle, but I think it would depend a lot on how it was structured and what their degree of authority was going forward. And until I was able to see that and form the board in such a way that it was going to be productive and constructive to work between the citizens and the police department, I'd have to hold reservations, but reservation on that. But overall, I don't have an issue with it depending on structure. Thanks.
Zeb?
Thank you. I'm not opposed to that idea. I agree with Mr. Gall. It would all depend on the structure of that and what the duties and responsibilities of that board would be. I do believe that the police in our city need as much support from the community just as we rely on the support from the police department. So if it's a board where we can all work together and make it work to do what's best for the city, I am all for that. Thank you.
Joe, are you with us again? Can you switch on your camera if you are? All right, let's go to Vicky.
Yes, I think all feedback is positive, especially I've heard great things about Chief Kudron. I know that change happens by listening, by understanding, and by forming the best solution based off of what is heard. I do have some questions because my understanding is this group is actually coming out of the county and it's for all law enforcement to gather feedback. So there's a lot of questions in terms of what that structure looks like. I do think we're blessed here to have a very safe community. Of course, every department needs improvements constantly. And I think this serves as an advisory board to the police just to make it function in a much more friendly way. It's just great to have feedback.
Jessica?
Thank you. I would support the creation of an oversight body just to assist this city's police and fire commission in gathering input and receiving advice from the public. I think we've seen in this past year that it's critical that we evolve and we change and we respond to the needs of our citizens. And I fully support that going forward.
Mitch?
Yes, I do. I do support that. I think it's modeled after a good model in the city of Madison. As you may have heard today, the state of Wisconsin, lawmakers in the state of Wisconsin, in fact, a former police officer, Van Wangard, a Republican, put forward legislation today to have an oversight board on the state level. So this is not something that is unusual or foreign. I think it's a great idea. I think the Police and Fire Commission could use an ombudsman, if you will, to help move the process of complaints and along within the community, and I think it's a fine idea.
Greg?
I'm about small government and less interference with all the departments and everything. So I would say probably no at this point. Feedback is great, but we have a wonderful police department, and unless problems arise in the future, I don't see that we need another committee to look after them.
Sam?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting proposition. I think one of the things we have to realize starting out is that our police force is one of the best police forces in the state. And on top of that, one of the best in the Midwest. I've actually spoken to many different people who are interacting with that. And I'm not opposed whatsoever to a community oversight board, but I do agree with some of the other candidates in that we need to take a closer look in how to be interacting with the police officers. I know that thus far we have been really at the cutting edge when it comes to good policing, especially when it relates to, for example, chokeholds were already not part of our police department's programs before the state outlawed it. And I think that as a city, we can keep in mind that the police force is already doing an excellent job, but I'm not opposed to other oversight boards.
Christopher.
I am 100% for it. I think the fact that we spend the most on our police and safety means that we need to have a group of people that are watching over that to make sure the money that the city is spending is going in the right direction and it is not being wasted anyway at all. And I think right now, especially with all the things that are going on in the US and with how people view police, I think the police would be happy to have a committee behind them that can kind of support them. And so, yes, I'm all for it.
And let's go to Joe.
Thank you. Sorry about the technical difficulties there. My name is Joe Conrad, and I'm running for mayor. To answer the question that's being talked about right now, I think getting community input is very important. In fact, one of the things I will do is I will promise to meet with members of the community every month that I'm in office to make sure that we listen to what people feel like. I also think that getting feedback is important as an advisory effort with the police, giving them feedback that way. Something more concrete that I have done is I've started a fundraising campaign a couple months ago to help the police department get new body cameras. The equipment will be much easier to turn on, and the video footage will be available to the DA immediately so that we'll have transparency for people in La Crosse. I think really what's going on here is a concern about safety. We all want to feel safe in our community.
Thank you so much for all of those answers. Our next question is, studies have shown that tenants often don't have a fair shot in court when an eviction is filed against them, as many people cannot afford to hire an attorney. As mayor, would you support a city-funded program to guarantee legal representation for tenants faced with eviction proceedings in La Crosse? Zebulon, this one goes to you first.
Thank you for that, Laura. I would support, I do support that. These are the people that live here, have jobs here, call this place their home. You know, there's a hard time going around for everybody right now. We need as much help as we can get, some more than others. And I think we as a community, as a city, should be coming together to help everybody with whatever they may need. Legal representation, I feel, is a very important part, especially when it comes to certain citizens or residents being forced out of their homes.
Joe, it's your turn.
Definitely made some great points. Obviously, it's not fair if people cannot get representation in a legal proceeding. I think we have to make sure that we're using all the services already available to us to get that representation. The city budget is going to be in a tough position with the COVID-19 reducing revenues, but it certainly is not fair if people cannot represent themselves in court. So the idea makes sense, but let's figure out how we're going to pay for it.
Vicky?
Yes, I know that there is an economic crisis coming, so we have put a moratorium on evictions, but that doesn't mean that the IOU, so to speak, has gone away. So as that eviction moratorium gets lifted, we're going to have some of these very conversations. And it is challenging because at a time that our city services are stressed, it's very hard to provide a new service. But I know, having served on the La Crosse Fair Housing Partnership, that there are attorneys, there's a bar association in town that we can tap to say, how do we provide these services for this impending problem? And we look at partnerships as opposed to it being owned by the city.
Jessica?
Thank you. Absolutely. In fact, UWL instituted a similar service for their students about 25 to 30 years ago, providing free legal aid and assistance to any students who were encountering issues with their landlord-tenant relationship. And it was just resoundingly successful, and it improved the housing conditions, and it certainly protected the tenants' interests. And I think that is an excellent thing that we can expand citywide to have that same effect. So yes.
Mitch?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's a great idea. If you've ever been taken the small claims court, you understand that it's a pretty daunting experience, just showing up there and not having any idea what to expect, and having someone that at least can show you the ropes or provide you some level of representation is a fantastic idea. People facing eviction absolutely need that. Absolutely agree with that.
I agree also that we need to protect everyone. I'm not very crazy about the city funding it. I think that, just like Vicky said, we can get the Lawyers Association, Bar Association involved, and we can get other people involved in there to raise the funds. Like I said before, I'm all about smaller government involvement, and I don't want to see the city, being involved in everything and funding everything.
Yeah, that's a very important concern. Absolutely. I think that part of what we need to look at is communicating well with everyone involved, right? So the landlords also have stakes in town, and I think that it's very important that we protect the residents who are there, but we also need to keep in mind the concerns of the landlords, who some of them have had issues with people staying too long and having trouble getting them out. But we need to keep in mind also the concerns of the renters as well, because I believe that the key here is having equal representation. So I think that before we decide to stand behind some issue where it's city funded, we need to look at other ways if we can provide that same service as other various candidates have pointed out. And I think that that may be a good approach to take to start with.
I do agree with it. I don't necessarily agree with squatters' rights, which is kind of the opposite of that. The main problem that we're seeing is that, the median income in La Crosse is about $22,000 for a single person. If you break that down with the 30% rule of thumb for paying for rent, you can only afford $552. Now the median rent is $825. So we're going to have a big problem, as Vicky had stated earlier. And we do have a lot of programs already out there. So I also agree with Sam on the fact that it's really the number one thing is about communicating, because as we get going through all these questions, the more things we ask the city to pay for, the more difficult it's going to be.
I do think that it's good to have the representation, because I've been to small claims court and had to do all the paperwork on my own to get money that was owed to me. So I understand the frustration it is for people going in there. However, you also have to take into consideration some people are serial, not pay their rent, get evicted a lot. And so there really needs to be a way to monitor how much of the resources are being used on the same person over and over again. It's not just black and white. We have to figure out a way to make it work, be feasible, and not cost a lot of money to the city. Thank you.
Thanks. I guess I'm not necessarily disagreeing with anybody's position on this, but I think that everybody touched on certain points there that have to be emphasized. The impact on the city budget could be substantial, and we need to take that into consideration. But there's other problems that are involved with this that would need to be vetted before you could get into a program like this. You've got small landlords who have the same issues when they're trying to evict people from the other side of the coin. So, there's a balance here, and this is a private transaction that's gone on. So again, I'm not immune to it, but I think we need to explore avenues of partnership with varying community stakeholders, possibly even at the county level, and see what could be done to make sure that people are being fairly represented, but on both sides of that coin. I think that needs to be taken into consideration without moving forward. But in principle, it sounds good, but we'd have to see how we could put it together.
All right. Our next question is, in 2019, the council passed a resolution pledging that the city and community would transition to 100% renewable and carbon-free energy by 2050. Meeting this goal will have environmental, economic, and health benefits for our community. As mayor, how important will making progress toward that goal be for you? What one action or change would you propose in your first year to help accelerate our transition to renewable carbon-free energy? Joe, you're first up on this one.
I think the idea of protecting the environment is something we would all agree with. The question is, what can the city do in the short run? I think we need to put in place plans to move in that direction over the long term. This next year is going to be a year where we're going to be focused on recovering from COVID-19. So you asked what to do in the first year. I think there are some very important issues that we have to deal with immediately, but not lose sight of our long-term goals to protect our environment. The budget in the city of La Crosse will be severely challenged. The revenue numbers that I saw in the budget don't really take into account the impact of COVID-19. We will not be raising the amount of dollars that our budgets say we will. Our mayor said we did not put money in for COVID-19 costs. That's not realistic. La Crosse is going to be very pressured financially. We have to be practical for this next year and worry about how we're going to pay for things. The environmental issues are real. They're important to be working on. And I'm not saying 2050 should just come around. We need to be taking action, but our focus needs to be on our community and our finances for the next 12 months.
One of the first things I would do in office is make sure that we're having a conversation with Gunderson. They've moved the entire hospital off the grid, so we really need to use their expertise. They're getting paid by entities across the world to do this exact thing. So they're a great resource in our backyard in terms of moving forward. I am also, I hate to be the drumbeat of the budget, but we're seeing a property tax increase as a result of our budget. And if we don't want property taxes to go up, we have to be mindful of that. I do think we can take a look at our projects that we have coming up and see how we can ensure that they are reducing energy. And then there's small things of how are we reducing energy use in our community through walkability and encouraging biking. And so I think there's some simpler things we can do, use the expertise in our backyard and make progress.
Jessica?
Yes, I was very proud to support the resolution that came before the council that committed our city to carbon neutrality by 2030. I am a strong believer in protecting our regional environment. Our marsh is our gem, and I will oppose anything that harms our environment. I believe the city is going to be facing the budget challenges, but that should not stop us in marching towards our goals. And one of the first things I can do as mayor in my first year is do an audit of all of our city vehicles. I see vehicles being parked in the city hall parking lot that do not have to run on gasoline. There is no reason that our staff cannot use electric vehicles to do things like trips around neighborhoods to perform inspections and other small inner city trips. And so I think there's more low-hanging fruit that we can pursue to show the public that we are still committed to this despite all of our budgetary challenges. Thank you.
Mitch?
I would agree with Jessica that there's definitely some low-hanging fruit, and vehicles are a great place to start. I think heavy construction equipment is a wonderful place to start for the city. We're all talking about capital expenditures, of course. These are not operational budget items, but capital expenditures. So we would bond for these things or borrow for them. But heavy construction can have a huge impact on the environment if we just switch to heavy construction electrical vehicles. But like Jessica said, inspection department running around the city in electrical cars. I think it's a great idea. Advocating for more biking and more human-powered transportation access would be ideal, and just using the bully pulpit as the mayor to get that done. These are all day one type items that I would pursue. No question. I appreciate the question.
I do agree too. We only have one planet. We got to take care of it. But on the same token, just like Joe said, the next 12 months are critical about, making sure we save small businesses, making sure we stay within budget. We have to make sure also that, whoever takes over, the budget has been already voted. So we have to make sure all these projects that are in there, that they stay within budget. Raising taxes is not the answer, but yeah, we need to make sure, that we stay within budget, we follow, and we'll do our best with it. But
absolutely, yeah. The environmental concerns for La Crosse are a huge deal. We have a very unique ecology. We have a very unique environment. We're between the bluffs, down by the river. We're at the headwaters of the Mississippi. So every decision we make, especially when it comes to water, is going to have an impact down the river. So we have to keep that in mind going forward. I think that when it comes to actions that the mayor would take, we have to keep in mind that, as some of the other candidates have pointed out, the budget is of supreme importance. We cannot be spending more than we're bringing in. We cannot be looking at a situation where we are so far into debt that we can never deal with it. I think that there are little steps that we can take. Some of the other candidates have mentioned some ideas, and we need to keep that in mind as going forward. But we also need to keep in mind that we do not want to put too much of a burden on the city and bite too much off to chew, as you might say. And I think that that is a good, we can take small steps, but right now, obviously with COVID, we need to deal with that and make sure that the budget is in line first.
We as a city never even saw that COVID was coming. You know, nobody did. And we don't even know really when it's going to stop. You know, everything we hear is it's going to keep going. It's going to spike again in March. So as for right now, like a lot of the other people said, what happens in the next 12 months or the first year, the city and the well-being of the city is the number one importance. I do think, that being said, that we need to start talking to the citizens as well and talk to them about biking more, walking more, using more of our mass transit. There's really no reason in the spring and summer that we shouldn't be mostly on our bikes or walking. As in with La Crosse, it's really easy to get from point A to point B. I understand the winter, and that's what the buses are for. And I know that it's been difficult to get in them sometimes, but they've also been not charging for a while either. So it's really based on all of us, and I agree that it is important, but the next year, the city is number one.
I agree with what everybody said so far. Absolutely, the budget comes first. Trying to find ways to make recycling programs more effective, better to use, easier to use. I know personally, I have a scooter, which I can get 100 miles for $3 worth of gas. Very small carbon footprint. I don't expect everybody else is going to go out and buy a scooter to get back and forth to work and everything that they need to do. But it's one way that I can cut down on my emissions that I'm putting out into the world. And it's, you know, I get to enjoy the nice weather too. But definitely want to focus on keeping the budget where it's at and not raising taxes, because people are already hurting from loss of work due to COVID. We can't afford for them to get further in debt because we raise prices up. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that it's the most important thing that we can do as far as that's concerned is in the capital budget, where we can build in the requirement for increased efficiencies in equipment we buy and cars and trucks that we buy. We have already started doing that. In fact, where our police fleet is beginning to change over to electric hybrid, gas hybrid vehicles, same with our bus fleet. So I think incorporating it into the capital budget is the most important element. I do want to take issue with a couple of the comments that have been made here. The fact is the city budget has been planned around the impact of COVID. We've made huge adjustments in there, including the adjustments that the mayor had referenced, which were in fact part of the budget, but they were not incorporated into the operating budget in such a way that would provide for ongoing PPE requirements. But it was not something that was not planned for. It was. I think we just need to be mindful of that going forward. And I think that as far as the operating budget is concerned, we're looking at funding a sustainability coordinator's position at some time, I think would be the way for us.
Martin.
Thank you.
I think that everybody hit on some solid points here. It is our planet. We only have one, so we should treat it nicely. The budget thing does raise a lot of questions. How can we move forward in planning for our renewable and carbon-free energy with certain restrictions that we have? I'm all about clean energy and, you know, encouraging everybody to use bikes. Ms. Blanche said she has a scooter. I have one of those as well. During the summertime, I encourage everybody I know, you know, efficiency, bicycle, scooters, anything like that. But we do need to get through the next 12 months and see what we can do as far as the city and community goes to make our dream of renewable energy happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those answers. So our next question, as we are all well aware, our nation is currently reckoning with centuries of relentless racial injustice. And in response to this, there have been many hollow calls for unity that lack actionable steps we can take to move forward toward justice. Knowing this, what are some of your specific and concrete policy ideas for addressing systemic racism in this community? Vicki, you're up first.
Unmute. I've been to some of the Waking Up White, and I think that's a great example of how our community is leading the charge for change. It's important to listen, to understand, and to ensure that whatever policies we create are going to address some of the challenges that we have. We are becoming more diverse as a city. Obviously, the more we welcome that, the more we're going to get higher doctors and engineers and people that really enhance our quality of life, and we can get more representation in the things that we do. And I think it's a matter of encouraging diversity of perspective, whether that is racial, whether that is sexual preference, gender. We need to be more inclusive as a community, and we'll be better for it.
Jessica.
This past summer, we saw the youth of our community lead on this issue. We saw them organize marches. We saw them speaking eloquently and discussing with us the experience of prejudice and racial bias that they've experienced. And they spoke very hopefully about change. And as mayor, I will do everything I can to keep those young people involved and active and help foster their development as young leaders of the future. As mayor, I want to bring people together. I think we're never going to always agree with each other on every issue, but we can build empathy and develop good relationships with each other. And I believe that as a city, we must make the investment so that we can ensure everyone in La Crosse has access to affordable housing, and that young entrepreneurs, regardless of their race, feel welcome and feel that they have opportunity to thrive in this community. And as mayor, I would listen and lead and continue this important work. Thank you.
Mitch?
Yeah, I think when Vicki said earlier about gaining perspective, I think it's very important to understand that there is a problem. Some people continue to negate that fact. I was thinking about when I was involved in a march in La Crosse after the George Floyd killing in Minneapolis, and I thought it was remarkable how the community gathered together. And inherently part of that was acknowledging that there was an issue of systemic racial injustice. And I think we need to do that and then educate ourselves. And it's difficult to identify concrete steps without doing that first. But I think, we made a step in the right direction not that long ago with the Human Rights Commission. And I think we can make other incremental steps in that way to, first of all, to acknowledge the problem and then focus on fixing it.
I think we need to celebrate diversity, celebrate our cultural differences. We have 10 mayoral candidates here, nobody's of color. And I know we do have a diverse community here, but we need to encourage people, to get to know their neighbors. I would start with neighborhoods first, start getting to know each other. That will make it a little bit safer, a little bit easier for people to bring up their problems. And then organize, cultural events. We have a wonderful downtown. Every weekend of the summer or even winter, we can have festivals, ethnic festivals. Celebrate all the cultures that we have in the city. I'm Greek. I moved in the U.S. about 30 years ago. I moved in La Crosse 8 years ago, and I know there's a lot of different cultures here. Let's start celebrating each other. Look at it, don't just look at the differences, but look at the similarities that we have and what we want to do for the city. And I think that will help everyone.
I think there are a lot of good suggestions that we've had here. And I think that the starting point, as some of the other candidates have pointed out, is sitting down and talking to other people. There's a song that goes, "To walk a mile in your shoes." And I think that it's really hard for us, especially if we're not a person of color, to be able to sit down and imagine what it's like. And so, one of the things I like to do is talk with other people. I talk with the Hmongs. I talk with the Indians who are moving from India into La Crosse in a greater number, and they have a growing population in La Crosse, and then the African-American culture as well. I think that the starting point is sitting down and talking with them, because now it's not as much, black and white, you might say. It's more all the different cultures now that we're interacting with, and trying to keep in mind how we can interact properly and respect them, and show respect and leadership in dealing with racial issues as they come up and as we have to deal with them.
This is bigger than just a race thing. This also goes along with talking about the LGBTQI members. And I think there's the two main things are education and discipline, where we need to start at the young age with our kids, and we need to show them and educate them on how important diversity is and how we're all just, the same people on the inside. Unfortunately, La Crosse, even Wisconsin, we tend to have the highest rate of incident when it comes to juveniles of color. And that's a big step in helping that. And then the biggest part, I think, is discipline, where anybody of authority or anybody that works for the city, or anybody, if there's any type of a racial crime or hate crime, so to speak, they need to be come down on with as much force as possible. We can't allow them to get away with anything anymore. It's just not fathomable.
I guess the best thing I can suggest would be to reach out to different organizations that are already in the community and see how we could meet their needs of their organization. Start with the schools and have a program starting in the elementary school level to help teach people the right way to treat others. Sometimes you just don't get that at home, and you would like to think that every child isn't taught to hate, but sometimes they are taught. And if you can kind of slow that down at school and let them, know that it's okay to like somebody who's of a different color or a different religion or a different ethnicity. It's, but I think we need to reach out to those groups and find out how we can help them, not just assume how we can help them, because as a Caucasian, I don't know what an African-American struggles with, but they could tell me, and I could certainly try to help them find a solution. Thank you.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I agree with a lot of the comments that everybody's already made, Kathy and Sam in particular. It is hard to walk in somebody else's shoes, but the fact is that the events of this past year and the events on January 6th kind of drove home the differences that we have got to deal with in our society, because we know what happened on January 6th wouldn't have happened the same way if those would have been people of color doing what happened in Washington, D.C. That said, I think that we need to deal with that as best we can. And from the mayor's perspective, the best thing that I can do there is to listen and to understand from people who are affected by this, and work with the city council, the Human Rights Commission, reinvigorate their mission. And we just have a diversity council committee that was established for city employees. We need to work well with all of them together to come up with policies that work for the benefit of everybody in the city.
I think a good step in the right direction for that is to encourage programs and organizations, businesses, and schools to implement diversity training. In the Navy, we used to do diversity training, whether it was for change in leadership roles or new sailors checking into the command. We would always cover it, and it seemed to be effective. Every resident in La Crosse plays a key role in racial equality. By spreading awareness and conducting diversity training, we all learn the importance of equality together and how it can positively or negatively influence our community. Thank you.
Joe?
This is a tough issue because all of us are sitting here growing up the way we did. Vicki made a comment. I was reading the paper, and before I finished the article, I went online, ordered one of these books, Waking Up White. I don't know that we have a lot of issue with people overtly acting like racists, but I think we all are naive to not realize that there's things that have just been baked into our lives that we make assumptions as white that we think we understand other people, and I don't know that we do. So a big part of it is kind of a wake-up check for yourself and say, gosh, without meaning to, what have I done? Do I really try to understand? Something I said earlier is that as mayor, I will meet every month with citizens to get feedback and ideas. There are a lot of great people in La Crosse that have been working on this issue. I think we need to tap that brain trust and get ideas on what we can do for concrete actions. Right now, I think making sure that we keep our ears open and we listen to people and we make every effort to empathize. Empathy is a very difficult skill, but it's one we have to try and work on. My goal as mayor is for everyone who lives here to treasure living in La Crosse the way our family does. It's a beautiful place to live. It's a safe place to live. And that's what everybody wants to have.
Thank you. All right, next question. What conflicts of interest might you bring to the position of mayor if you won the election, and how would you overcome them? Jessica, this one goes to you first.
Thank you. Well, many of you already know I'm a small businesswoman. My family owns several apartment buildings located between WTC and UWL. We've been in business for over 50 years here in the community, and by far we're one of the most popular and successful landlords in our business. And I guess there are certainly areas in which it could be a conflict of interest for me to be the mayor and a small businesswoman. I think that's true of anyone in business. And so I believe that there are already ethics guidelines, and we also have a city attorney who's trained to make those determinations. And on a couple of votes, I have actually consulted the city attorney as to whether or not my position on council would require me to abstain from votes. And I did on several occasions, and I would certainly continue that practice as mayor going forward. Thank you.
Mitch?
Thanks so much for that question. As many of you know, I spent 15 years as a broadcaster, a journalist, and a news and talk program host at Midwest Family Broadcasting in La Crosse. And I know that it's the presumption is that there's still an association there. And I'd like to think that there is not. I do have a tendency to believe that I show some probably more deference to journalists than I should. I'm not sure what other conflicts of interest I would have necessarily. I'm certainly not gathering up massive donations from organizations that would suggest that I have a conflict of interest. So I would definitely keep in tune with that. And like Jessica said, I would defer to the city attorney to make sure that that is something that is not existing or impacting anything I do.
My only conflict of interest would be parking. I am the most ticketed vehicle downtown probably for parking. So I do have a sweet spot for those guys coming around all the time and giving tickets. But in all fairness, small business owner or running a small business downtown, I can see how people can, view some of my ideas about helping small businesses as a conflict of interest. But I think I can remove myself from a situation like that just by, asking other people to advise or counsel on that. So thank you.
Yeah, I think that being as young as I am and also being a small business owner, really the only conflict of interest that I might have would be my business. But I've already planned out that if I'm elected, I would pass that on to my family and they would take that over. I think that primarily having fresh perspective and new energy to bring to City Hall, really the only thing I offer is a representation of the needs of the city. And I think that that is primarily what people are wanting. And that is what people are desiring, is someone who will stand up and represent them, who doesn't have a conflict of interest, because I haven't been in here 50 years and I have all these allies and buddies who own big businesses or who might benefit from a contract that I sign. I think that that makes it really unique for me to stand in a place where, I don't necessarily have all that, but at the same time, I think that I have the energy and the perspective to help drive a fresh new look in the mayor's office.
I don't really have many conflicts of interest. I don't own a business anymore. I do care about small business, but I don't own one anymore. I'm not a career politician. I have never worked for the government. I've never worked on council. I've actually fought against most of it in my life. And I don't have any other things that are pulling me back, whether it be family or other things. I pretty much am only focused on being mayor, and that's really that's all that's important to me. I'm just a very independent, middle-aged guy looking to do something good for La Crosse.
I don't think that being a salon owner is have very much of a conflict of interest at the city hall level, although I am the jail barber, so that could be a conflict there, and I probably would have to step back from doing that job because I'm working for the jail. But that I could ask the city attorney if he would feel that's a conflict of interest, because I am not paid through city money. I'm paid directly by the indigent from an indigent fund or by the inmates themselves. So no tax dollars pay my service fees when I go do the haircuts there. But that would be the only conflict I can imagine that I would have. Thank you.
Martin?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, my internet connection bugged out on me there. I'm assuming it's my turn. I don't have any conflicts of interest. I'm an old retired white guy. So the only reason that I'm doing this is because I think it would be helpful to the city if I do it. I have got experience on the council, but I am surely not a lifetime politician. I don't even like it when people call me a politician because I'm not. I consider myself to be a public servant. So I believe that I have no conflicts of interest, no worries, but I frankly don't think anybody else here would either. I think we're probably 10 pretty intelligent folks here. We have got city staff. We have attorneys that will keep us in line. I'm not worried about that from anybody's perspective, but the only job I would have would be with the city of La Crosse. Thanks.
I don't think that I do have any conflicts of interest. I do manage a bar and grill on the south side of La Crosse. That's been going on for a year. You know, before that, the last 11 years, I've been gone away in the military. So I can't say that I do have any of those, but if there are any sorts of concerns, yes, there are ways to, you know, hey, is this going to be a problem? Am I allowed to do this or am I not allowed to do that? Help one, help all. You know what I mean? That's what it's all about. Just a Navy vet that wants to do what's best for his city. Thank you.
Well, I guess Marty and I are the 20% of the group that are retired old guys. But I don't really have any conflicts of interest either. I think it's great that the mayor's job is nonpartisan. I think we've all seen too much bickering and things just not happening at state and national levels because of that. I think it's great that we're nonpartisan for this office. I also think that we have a great group of candidates here that are running. The only conflict I might have is I do think my taxes are too high, but I just want to make sure we spend our money the right way.
Just to provide variety of answers. So it's funny because conflict of interest means you have some financial gain by the votes that you take, which technically we're all taxpayers. So we have a financial interest in the votes that we take. But the point of that is that we all bring passions to the table that doesn't necessarily equate to conflicts of interest. I'm a homeowner. I do own a small business that started up during COVID. I have sat on boards for nonprofits. I belong to a church. And so those passions and those relationships just make us that much more educated as we come into the position. It doesn't mean that it's a financial conflict of interest. It just means we're bringing experience.
Thank you for those answers. So for our next question, the city has a housing crisis in part because wages are too low and rent and other costs such as transportation and medical care are too high. As mayor, what steps will you take to prioritize affordable housing and end homelessness in La Crosse? And would you support a housing first policy? Mitch, you're first on this one.
Yeah, I would support a housing first policy. And I want to make sure that we all understand what that means. I don't want my comments to be misconstrued, but a housing first means that those who are facing homelessness require housing first to deal with the issues that are most prevalent in their lives. And that means mental health issues, addiction issues, anything like that. It doesn't mean that we give everyone their own apartment or their own home. It just means that we find a way to provide housing for them. We follow the model that the La Crosse Collaborative to End Homelessness started several years ago, and continue with that collaborative effort to make sure that we address homelessness. In relation to housing crisis, I mean, there's so many things to address here. This is multiple questions, but we need to address the housing stock and how the dilapidated aspects of that, and how we need to encourage those who own property to make sure that that property is well maintained. There's a lot to do here.
I agree with Mitch on pretty much everything that he said. I mean, this can take 5 or 10 minutes to answer, but I want to touch a little bit on the wages. Minimum wage should be a living wage, not just a minimum wage, just that makes, people struggle. We do need better housing. I know there's a supply and demand. There's not enough housing in La Crosse, or enough good quality housing, safe housing. But I think if we get everybody, individual entities involved, get them on the table with the city, we can find a better solution. There's a lot of nonprofit organizations that they work on the homeless problem already. I know at least 2 of those organizations that they're working with, and I've been involved with them. But yeah, there's solutions coming, hopefully.
This is a very complex issue that we're talking about. As Mitch pointed out, you have mental health is a big issue. Drug and alcohol abuse ties into this as well. And you also have to realize that not everyone who is homeless necessarily wants to have a place to stay. So I think that the best solution moving forward is going to be to talking to the various organizations, which I have done. I have reached out to several of the major homeless organizations that help with homelessness and mental health and drug abuse. And I think that a great starting point is to talk to them, because they are in the fight and they are dealing with this firsthand, and they really know what sort of approaches are best and most useful and most logical in the approach of dealing with homelessness and all the other interconnected issues. I think that getting a detox center might be a good start in the area, maybe working better on a triage center. I think there are a lot of different solutions that have been brought forward, but the most important thing is going to be listening to the stakeholders and the people involved, and talking to them first before we decide to have a perfect solution.
The housing crisis is a big crisis here, especially in La Crosse. I talked earlier about what the median income is, the median rent, and we can see we already have a discrepancy there. I think one thing that I would do right away with that is put a rent cap that would be based on a percentage of the actual value of the building. That would then allow us to have different quality places and have different rents. I also would like to see a percentage of the amount of the value of the building to be put back into whatever building it is every so many years, which then would also create a better living situation for a longer time. I also don't want to see any larger companies get any kind of bonuses or any kind of tax deductions for buying a condemned building. Anybody that condemns a building should have to pay a penalty for it. When it comes to the homeless situation, I agree with what everybody else has said so far.
So, yeah, I think putting the Homeless First initiative in is a great idea. I also agree, Chris has a great idea with the rent cap, because I know my first apartment was not a great apartment and it was only $320. That same apartment that nothing has changed except for inflation is now rented out for almost $800 a month. It's a 1-bedroom apartment. It's in a really bad neighborhood. And I don't understand how a building that's that old is getting that kind of money. I think putting money back in and making them have them refurbish their buildings and keep their buildings up is a good way to make the city look nice too, and be safe for people who live there. People work hard for their money. They shouldn't have to be, freezing when their windows are shut. They should be comfortable in their homes. Thank you.
I think what we need to do, I do support the housing first policy. I think that's a hell of a good idea, and I think that's something that we should look to. I do believe that there's a lot of things that should be discussed on this particular issue. One thing that we need to do for the homeless problem, we need to realize that although we're looking at this from the mayor's perspective, this is a regional problem that's centralized in La Crosse, because La Crosse is where the services are. So I think we need to take a more regional approach with this, working through the county and look at the programs that already exist to see if we can reinforce them, see who does what best, and concentrate those areas of resources right there so we're not duplicating efforts for this. In the meantime, we need to strengthen the programs that we have for people with existing homes for repairs and replacement if necessary. We have to keep insisting on affordable housing component with new developments that go in. And you could go on this, but I think it's something that is the city can handle if we can work with our partners.
I do support a housing first policy. I do agree with Chris on the idea of a rent cap. Homelessness, I believe, is something that, as Martin said, is a regional problem. We do need to set them up for success. We don't have to pay anybody's rent, buy anybody a house, but we do need to set them up to be independently successful, you know, give them a place to stay for a little bit, give them some clothes, get them on the right track so that later on, you know, down the road here, they can get back into society as a productive member, you know, with a job and everything else that they can take care of themselves.
So we're talking both about homelessness and affordable housing. There's a lot going on that topic. For homelessness, about an hour ago, 7 o'clock, people outside Catholic Charities got to pick a card out of a card deck. After that was done, they took a second deck of cards and started naming them off. If you were lucky to get a bed because you had that card, you went inside. If you didn't get a card, you're still outside with that wind blowing in the cold. Is homelessness a real issue? It is, because it's real people. It's a real complicated topic. We talked about substance abuse. We talked about mental health. There's a lot going on there that needs to be addressed. It's not going to get fixed overnight, but it is really a problem. As far as housing stock, I think a good point was made. In La Crosse, more than half of households are renters. Landlords are doing this for a business. They made an investment. They want a return on their investment. We understand that. But when we are landlords, we don't keep that property up the same way we would if it was our home that we were living in.
So we're going to move on to Vicky.
I watched a live stream yesterday that was United Way Cooley Cap in the La Crosse Community Foundation. They talked about how 50% of the people in the city of La Crosse are one tragedy away from homelessness. And I've been there. My 35-year-old dad died of cancer. The bills were unsurmountable, and essentially paying rent was our salvation. So I'm compassionate with the people that are homeless. This will be an endless cycle if we don't address the mental health and the addiction issues. And then we can talk about affordable housing. So affordable housing, we do have stock that needs to get replaced. And we have students, we have families living in that housing. We need to replace that with quality housing. And then we also need to focus on how do we attract and keep our middle class, because this is all about creating variety within our community and having variety in our tax base. So that's the whole spectrum from homeless to middle class in a 1-minute morsel.
The lessons that we've learned over the past few months since the pandemic hit have been game-changing. We've heard from our experts, the people on the ground working with the homeless every day. We have got to expand beyond the housing first model, which currently only relies on private independent housing, to include what's called bridge housing. I've spoken with Kim Cable, Julia McDermott, and I've relied on my own background in housing to put this issue at the forefront, so that our community realizes that we cannot stand still, we must evolve, and we must strive to provide the services and the opportunity for success that our people need. We can no longer simply stick somebody in an apartment and cross our fingers and hope that it works out. It's inhumane and it's unsustainable. We must take our limited resources and make a substantial investment in government-owned housing and remove the profit factor for populations for which it's inhumane to cast them into the private market. I am in full support of the city stepping up to be the capital partner in putting an end to homelessness in this community once for all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for those answers. So MTU buses are currently fare free in La Crosse due to COVID. Would you support making fare-free public transit permanent in La Crosse? Greg, you can start on this one, please.
I actually grew up in a city with public transportation that worked. Everybody loved taking the bus. Everybody loved taking the metro. I grew up in Thessaloniki, Greece, second biggest city in Greece, 2 million people. We have to make using the bus not a stigma. You know, people here don't use the bus, and we have a great service. We just got to make sure we have better routes. We have to make sure we service everybody. The buses are wonderful, and from what I understand, we're getting 8 new buses pretty soon that they're going to be good for the environment. So, but we need to make sure, you know, that there's a campaign that encourages people to take the bus. We can't be driving all the time. That will solve other issues too, like just like the parking and everything else. Charging for the bus, it's not a bad idea. It should be a very affordable though. Everywhere that I've been, bus is the cheapest transportation in any big city in the world, and everybody's using it because it's convenient, cheap, and runs all the time.
You know, there's a lot here with the bus issue. We want to start with considering the fact that, yes, we have already got those new buses coming in. I think that's a good start. We also need to look at making sure that it's compatible with the usage, right? We want to encourage usage of the buses. However, if we're not having very much usage, we can't make people use the buses, right? We have to keep in mind that we all have a free choice to use our own transportation, but encouraging carpooling and using public transportation is a good start. But we also have to realize that the transportation issue isn't just about the buses. We have, as Greg pointed out, roads that are, some of them are in very poor condition, and we have to keep in mind the fact that we have to keep those up and going. And we also have to realize that not all the transportation that happens in our city is just local. We have a lot of people from the surrounding areas, from various neighborhoods outside of La Crosse, whether it be French Island or Shelby or Onalaska, that come in and visit our downtown, and they're not able to take buses because the buses don't go that far. So that's something else we need to look at and keep that in mind when we're talking about the issue of transportation and buses.
I agree with Greg on the fact that the number one thing is to make it so that people want to use the bus. They've been available for a while. We have this weird idea that we must always have our vehicle at all times. I don't know if it's a safety thing or what it is. So we need to spend more time and talk to people on what they want to see out of the mass transit situation in general. I would also like to see, we do the safety ride for the students. I'd like to see more of that done for the surrounding area in La Crosse. I think that would help a lot with policing issues, with public transit issues, with everything. As far as should it be free? I don't think so. I think there should be a small fare, an affordable fare, because that will then be used to maintain the buses, to keep everything going, to keep the people that are driving them happy so they get paid in the amount that they need to.
We have a great bus system. There's a bus stop right outside my house. There's one right outside my salon. The bus is a good service that gets used a lot on the north side, getting to downtown to go to appointments. I don't think the fare is that expensive. It's less than $2, I believe. And if you need to transfer to a different bus, you can get a transfer slip. I grew up riding the bus. If I wanted to go somewhere, my parents weren't hauling me across town. I figured out which bus route to use, and I did it. And I think if we can just start teaching the younger generation to use it, it's a great resource. But it definitely can't be free, because then we're losing money on that. And when the upkeep on the buses isn't free, so that's where that money goes back into. Thank you.
A lot of good comments. Again, I think the goal of a free bus service would certainly be something that would be interesting to look at. But, I think the biggest problem that we have with bus ridership right now is the fact that most folks are based around instant gratification. They want to get in their car and they want to go, and that's the end of the story. And we can't expand the bus system enough to feed that need. But I do think there are things we could do to upgrade the bus system, to Greg's point, that would make it more viable. And we could surely look at something as far as fares, but I think realistically, if you look at our monthly pass system that we have, pretty reasonably priced. And I know there are programs that are provided for folks through employers and through the certain agencies in town where they can actually get reduced cost or no cost for those. So I think anything we can do to enhance the MTU is to everyone's benefit, but I think it's not quite as simple as just saying they're going to be free from this point forward.
I think there's been very good points from all the other candidates here. Do I believe in a fare-free system? Not entirely. I think that there should be a reduced fare system, just because that money coming in will help, you know, with the programs, the upkeep, and everything else that's required for the MTU system to keep up what it is. But I think that if we reduce the fare on the MTUs, a lot more people would more than likely start using it with that reduced fare. And a lot of people do utilize that transportation, you know, school, work, whatever. So if we made it more inviting and could get more people to start using it, that would be good. But there's got to be some sort of revenue coming back. And I believe we could do that with a reduced fare. Thank you.
You're muted, Joe.
Okay, I still, even that would be muted, I do think that the cost of using the bus system is not really the issue. The cost is convenience and safety. Marty, to your point, I managed to lock my car, keys in the car downtown, so I actually tried using the bus system, and I was surprised how convenient it was. One thing I did notice is lighting was an issue around the stops where I had to change buses. So I think we need to look at little things like that to make sure they're okay. But I think the point of trying to promote bus usage and trying to emphasize that would be valuable to the community. It answers our question about earlier with the dependence on fossil fuels as well.
I think we have to be careful as government that we don't provide a intended solution that doesn't address the problem. So what is the problem that we're trying to solve and what's causing it? It's not price. Everybody here has talked about how inexpensive it is to ride the bus. It is convenience. And I do know from talking to businesses in the past that some of the bus stops are not convenient for getting employees to their places of business. And so if that is the intention, is to get people to where they need to work and where they need to shop, we can certainly look at the convenience of where those stops are. And I think that we also have to remember traffic patterns are being disrupted. We have offices that may not come back to in person, and it's going to be really critical before we start talking about free bus fares that we're looking at where the bus needs to go, because traffic patterns have changed.
So I'll take a little bit different approach. I think it's not so much that we want to eliminate the fares as it is we want to make our bus system as welcoming and as attractive and practical so that people who can easily afford to pay fares choose to use the bus and pay into the system. But I do support for those social services that are administering to our vulnerable populations that they have access to free bus passes and tokens so that we can address affordability for those who have no choice but to depend on our bus service. You know, in a given year, we typically have 1 million bus rides that we provide to the public through our MTU system. That ridership went down 60 to 75% during the year of the pandemic. But the good news is that one of the innovations we brought in 2 years ago, which was the MTU Go, the circular routes that brought residents of the South Side neighborhood to grocery stores, that was a tremendously successful program. We also rolled out an app that helps people track when the bus is going to be at a particular stop and other improvements to the bus stops themselves. I support us improving that system, but in order to do that, we do need the solid revenue, not just the federal subsidies. And we're very fortunate at the city that we have a very instrumental leader in that department who's leading these changes. So I do support making the buses free for those populations who can benefit from that asset, but we do need to charge fares for those who can afford it. Thank you.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, yeah, this is not a new idea. In fact, Corvallis, Oregon, Olympia, Washington, and Kansas City, Missouri have all implemented free mass transit. It's nothing that we would have to invent. It's something we can do already. It doesn't mean that we can't tweak it in some kind of way. We do need to make the mass transit system in La Crosse something that is much more attractive. There's no question about that. Make it much more convenient. Make it like Jessica was talking about, the circulator routes have been great. I mean, La Crosse benefits from having this built-in fair payers, but from the universities, that's part of their student fees. So we get that every year, which is fantastic. But we could definitely find ways to make it more attractive and make it much more convenient. But this is really just, after all, it's kind of it's a kind of transportation funding that the city does, not unlike road repairs. It's just for different economic group. And I think we can probably do something to tweak that a little bit and potentially make fares free for all, but certainly more affordable, or if at least free for a lot of people. Thanks.
All right, thank you for those answers. Last question before we go to closing statements is, would you support capping the amount of incentives developers can receive through the city's tax increment financing districts? And we'll go to Christopher first on this question.
Right now, no. I think that we want to bring in as many developers as possible and try and have them give us the best pricing on it. You could see a lot of developers that we had and the things that they did during COVID, which was pretty fantastic. I myself would like to know some other options of different ways that we could benefit from doing different, not the TIFs, but sorry, this is not one of my best subjects. So I guess basically the answer is no, not right now. We need everything that we can get.
I agree. I don't think capping it right now, because with everybody being out of work and business being slow, I think we need to give as much to get people back and feel comfortable building, redeveloping. I know with U-Haul buying the Kmart location, a lot of people are up in arms about that, but that building sat empty for 3 years. They should get the permits that they need. It's going to be an asset to have more jobs in this town, and it'll clean up the lot. So definitely not capping it. That's going to drive away people for wanting to build in this area. Thank you.
My turn. I'm not in favor of a cap necessarily, but I would have to say that realistically, the programs that someone has to do to get financing assistance through a TIF right now, there are guidelines in the programs that we have that do present a cap based on the assessed value of the property that they're going to be putting up. There is some wiggle room on those, but it basically depends on what the catalyst for the project is. But right now, I believe it's 10% of the increase in the assessed value is what we normally look at as a maximum. So I think that it already exists, but in general, I think if it's going to be a beneficial program, the TIF financing that we can provide is a very important tool, and we need to use it judiciously for the benefit of the city. Thanks.
Everybody has very good points here. I'm going to say no, I don't support in capping that. Just to sum it up, we do need every bit that we can get. Thank you.
I think this is a great question because it gets at a huge issue for us, which is revenue. We can't just keep raising taxes. The only way to work is to increase our tax base. So that means development has to be encouraged. At the same time, I have been surprised looking at some of these projects, how many years it will take to pay off the TIF fund before we see any property tax dollars from the project. So it has to be a balance. We need to encourage developers, but we need to be mindful of how much TIF we have out there and when it starts producing tax revenue for the city. We have to increase our tax base.
I am not for putting a cap on TIFs, and the main reason is to understand what the point of it is. It is to encourage development, and it's to take those dollars that are spent on investing in that infrastructure to bring those businesses there, because you may have a property that's performing at let's just say $100,000, and if you can turn that property into $200,000, you're growing your tax base. One of the things that I talk about is the way to keep our property taxes even is to increase our top property tax base. Putting lights on in dark stores, getting those businesses filled, putting properties on the mobile oil site, now called River Point North, I believe. that's what's going to increase our property tax, and we spread the cost of our city across multiple businesses. That's our goal, to keep property taxes even.
I believe Council President Gall was correct in that there is currently a 10% cap, and I actually support the cap. I believe we do need to keep a level playing field, and we also need to prevent a developer negotiation Armageddon, where they keep asking for more and more and more. We are currently in the midst of an economic recession, but someday we will emerge from it, and we do have to allow the private market to come back in and recover. And I think if we go too far ahead of ourselves with giving away the farm, we'll wind up with too much TIF debt, and we will struggle to be paying off the bonds when we need that revenue to eventually flow back into the general fund. So I believe that there are such a thing as good TIF deals. There are also bad deals. And there's always going to be somebody who will take a predatory approach towards trying to get city incentive money, when realistically, they probably would have done the project without our help. That being said, there are good developers, honest people who are have a sentimental connection to our community, who want to do something positive and beneficial for all. And I would be willing to support that. But the cap helps put a limit on how much we will dip in to give cash away. Thank you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that there should be limits on TIF financing, and it's certainly good that the city has something in place like that for development agreements now. I mean, let's be clear that when we're talking about TIF financing, we're typically talking about commercial properties. I mean, one of the reasons that La Crosse struggles with property tax impact so much on a personal level, personal property level, is that we rely too much on commercial properties for that tax base, and we need to really focus on lifting up the tax values or the property assessed values of the private of homes as much as commercial real estate. Let's also remember that TIF financing was intended for redevelopment of blighted properties, not just redevelopment, but redevelopment of blighted properties. We can overuse this, we can abuse this, and we should not do that. Let's remain conscientious of that as well.
I would agree more with Joe. We need to find a balance. We've got to have some kind of synergy between developers and the city. Developers have enjoyed this last year. You know, they didn't struggle. They enjoyed record profits. They have a lot of projects going on. But it was nice to see them, you know, paying back for the community. They have a fund that is supporting a lot of the small businesses. They're giving grants out. So as long as we find a good balance between, you know, the good developers or the majority of the developers with the city, I think we will be able to, move forward without carrying too much debt. Having a cap is not a bad idea, but we need to find the balance, you know, what's the right thing for both ends so they can prosper.
I think to sum up what everybody else here is saying is that we have to have a balance, right? We have to make sure that the developers are providing what they're basically bringing to the table for the city. And we need to make sure that it's happening in a timely manner, that we're seeing the return on investment in a reasonable time, and that we're not waiting, you know, a long period of time to get that money back on. And then we're not putting too much pressure on the commercial districts. That's something to definitely keep in mind. I mean, we've all seen what happened with Foxconn, and I know that's not exactly the same scenario, but that's relevant because we don't want to be having someone come in, oh, we're going to build this property and it's going to be worth $300,000 and employ 50 people. And then it comes up and it's only worth, you know, $150,000 and it employs 5 people. We have to keep that in mind, and we have to make sure that we're continuing to grow the city and yet making sure that we're not putting too much burden on other people and making it a runaway profit for the developers.
Thank you so much for those answers. It's closing statement time, so you'll all have 1 minute for that. And Greg, we're going to start with you for that.
I want to thank everyone in the conversation. I want to thank everybody that will watch this conversation. I think we're fortunate enough to live in a wonderful place that we have a lot of people that care. I know we can do a little bit better, but we need to make sure, you know, that the city becomes a place that people feel comfortable to go to. Right now, the city hall, I feel that most of the time is just unapproachable for everybody. We need to concentrate on bringing people together, neighborhoods together. If we get to know each other, I think a lot of our differences are going to go away. We're going to find out that we're a lot more similar than we're different. I will encourage everybody to shut off Facebook and Twitter and just stay away from the negativity. We can do so much better if we work together. And I know we can bring together companies, entities, individuals, and we can all work together with the city for a better future.
I first want to say thank you to the Independent for hosting this independent, no pun intended, debate. And I think you guys did a very good job on it. I think that what we're looking at right now as a city is we're standing at a crossroads. Obviously, we have huge challenges we're going to be facing, whether it's recovering from COVID, the impact on small businesses, property taxes becoming a bigger issue for the people of La Crosse, homelessness also being a concern with the moratorium eviction notice being lifted. So we have to consider all these things. And I think that right now, I, as the younger candidate, have the energy and the fresh perspective to bring to this race, that I have a unique look on the concerns we have, and I can build a bridge between the youth and the older population of the city and move forward in a fresh perspective. And please get out and vote February 16th and put me to work for you.
This has been a very eye-opening experience. Big shout out to Marty and Vicky. You guys really know the city very well, and it was a pleasure listening to you talk and answer some of those questions. I feel the same as a lot of the people on here, that we're all worried about what's going to happen in La Crosse in the short run. I will say that there are a lot of intelligent people, and that whomever you pick for mayor is going to have a lot of intelligent advisors around them. So find the person that you believe is going to care about the city and its citizens the most, and find the person that you believe is going to listen to everybody and not have any preconceived notions on anything. Thank you again, and I will talk to you all very soon.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to reach out and let people know how we all feel. I feel very honored to be one of the 10 running for the position of mayor. I love this town. I feel that the other 9 candidates also love this town. It's important. Please use your privilege, your right, your constitutional whatever, and vote on February 16th. I would love your vote for me, but vote for whoever you feel is best qualified. I don't think any of us want this town to be bad. I think we all want to do its best, and we all bring such unique, different opinions and ideas. I think we can only go up from here. So thank you very much for your time. Have a great night.
Thanks. It's been a real pleasure meeting everybody, such as this is. I hope we can get rid of this at some point in the very near future. Really good comments tonight, really good thoughts. I have to say, I think that first off, we have to get everybody out to vote February 16th. It's very important choice. I'm running for this job because I want to offer the experience of my life and the experience I've had on the city council to the city. I have no preconceived notions. I have no agenda. My intention is to come in here, work with a new council. We're going to have at least 6 new members, if not 7. I think they're going to have a pretty aggressive and progressive agenda. And I look forward to working with them with that and helping us to get through this trying time. We're just coming out of COVID. We're coming out of a lot of impacts that we have. We've been involved in that for a long time, and I look forward to being part of that if that's what the voters decide to do. I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you, Eric and Laura, for hosting this for us. It's nice to see that we have so many residents of the city here that want what's best and have chosen to step up to represent the city. There is work to do moving forward, strong work ethic, attention to detail, and putting the needs of the city and its residents are all key factors in moving together in a positive direction. I do want to work for the people and with the people to make that happen. As everybody else said, be sure to get out there and vote on February 16th, regardless of who it's for. We all appreciate your support. Thank you all and have a good night.
Like everyone else, kudos to our host for tonight. Thank you very much. As a candidate, I have one major difference, I think, and that is my experience after 35 years in banking. I've managed organizations larger than the city of La Crosse with twice as many employees. And I say that only because I'll hit the ground running. I'm used to working with a lot of challenges and helping the city recover from COVID and helping our small businesses prosper and add new employees are going to be very important going forward. Our family is cherished living in La Crosse. I don't have all the answers. I do pledge that if I'm elected mayor, I will meet with people from the city every month to get input and ideas on what we need to be doing. I want to help make sure that everybody in the city views La Crosse as a safe, inclusive, great place to raise their family like we did. Thank you.
We've touched on, but really haven't tackled the big issue in the room, which is our economy. We have to stabilize our friends, our neighbors, our locally invested businesses. And when we put people back in jobs, all things that we're talking about here are possible. We have to keep the lights on in our businesses and get them shining brightly. Mother Teresa said that without money, there is no mission. So each of us brings strengths into the mayor's position: communication, knowledge of government, knowledge of finances, business acumen. But here's the thing: La Crosse deserves all of that and more. You deserve a person who can lead us out of an economic crisis. I've already led and continue to spotlight small local businesses at their deepest time of need. You deserve a person who brings working relationships with businesses, government, nonprofits, churches, and volunteers into discussions. La Crosse needs a person who encourages diversity of perspective. I am that person. Please vote for Vicki for mayor.
So thank you again, Eric and Laura, for hosting us this evening. I am running for mayor because La Crosse needs effective and bold leadership to move us forward. We need leaders who understand city government and have a proven track record of getting things done. We need a mayor who will collaborate and build the relationships needed to bring all of the future progress that our citizens deserve. Our next mayor must listen and lead in order to overcome the great challenges of the pandemic and the ensuing economic recession. I was born here in La Crosse. I grew up here. I went to Central High School. I graduated UWL, and I also recently received my master's degree from Viterbo University. I love La Crosse, and I'm excited about our future. Throughout my career, I've been that bridge builder, and I'll stand up for each and every resident of the city. And that's what I'll do as your mayor. Thank you for your time, and I'd be honored to earn your vote.
Well, thank you to La Crosse Independent and La Crosse Local Podcast for hosting this. This has been such a pleasure, not only to speak with everyone who's watching, but also speak among the rest of these very dedicated candidates for mayor within the city of La Crosse. It is really an honor to be among this group, everybody who wants to do something positive for the city. You know, I have a passion for creating a pillar of a city that it embraces social justice and economic stability and growth and really moves forward towards the future. And I believe that that is something that we all want to do. But the question is, how can we best do it? I believe that I'm that person. I would like very much to earn your vote. I encourage you to check out my website at mitchreynolds.com, and I'll be hosting a Facebook Live coming up at 8:30 right after this. Thank you again so much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you to all of our candidates for participating tonight, and thank you to everyone that tuned in. And also a big thank you to the organizations who helped us with their questions for this evening's event, and to Michael, Dylan, and Brent for their technical assistance, and for Laura for co-hosting. And before we wrap up, I want to remind everyone who tuned in tonight that it's your job to hold these candidates accountable and to hold whoever wins the election to the commitments they made during the campaign to push them in the right direction. It's vital that we build a thriving local democracy right here in La Crosse, and each one of you can have an impact. So please stay involved. Thank you and good night.